Good evening from PLUGHITZ Studios in Largo, Florida. I'm Scott.
I'm Avram.
And we are here with episode 530 of F5 Live, Refreshing Technology for Sunday, June 30th, 2019. This show is a proud part of the Tech Podcast Network. If it's tech, it's here. This week, Apple's got a new design direction, Switch Online might have an expanded game collection, and privacy has a new antagonist in the government. Wherever you are and however you're accessing our show, whether it be on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, on any of our live stream platforms, livestream.com, Periscope, Mixer, Twitch, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, on any of the podcatchers, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Podcast Play app in the Windows Store, the myriad of others like Spotify or TuneIn Radio, or of course on our website, PLUGHITZlive.com. Thank you for making us a part of your day. Like I said, this is F5 Live, the flagship show here on the PLUGHITZ Live family of content. We are live Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for about an hour, and we will talk about the news of the week. There are two ways that you can join us. The first is live at 9 p.m. by going to f5live.tv/join us. There you can chat with us in the chat room, in the studio, and give us your feedback on the topics as we talk about them. The best way to do that will be on either Mixer, Twitch, or YouTube. If you comment on Facebook, we will not see it until after the show, so that's important to know. If you can't join us live, that's okay. PLUGHITZlive.com/subscribe. You can see all of our shows there and all of the different ways that you can subscribe. I guess with that, Avram, it's been a couple of weeks. How have you been? You are muted, friend. I don't have anything from you.
How's this? Oh,
there
sorry.
We go.
Yeah,
I got you.
Good. So, it's been a busy couple of weeks. When we get to my segment, I'll talk about the thing that I've been working on and off for 2 weeks before last week, pretty much continuously, and before that a little bit. It's always a lot going on. Always a lot going on at Tom's Hardware. Obviously, we're excited about. Everybody knows that there's going to be a big AMD launch. Actually, I think a week from today. Or a week from today, a week from tomorrow,
something like that.
So it's there's a lot going on right now. This is not your typical summertime slow news time.
No, for sure, right? We're seeing all kinds of interesting stuff, and I've got a stack of products that I've been working on reviews for that are all coming out this week or next week, and then we've got next in 2 weeks we've got Prime Day.
Oh yes, that is going to be quite a day, Prime Day.
Yes, indeed. I am going to put this out there for our listeners. This new microphone that I've been using that I am absolutely in love with, this whole family is going to be on sale on Prime Day. So I'm super excited about that. The USB version of this, basically the neat version of the mic that you're using, Avram, is going to be $99. The original retail is $350. It's going to be $99. I'm so excited.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a good time for people who are trying to get into podcasting inexpensively to get a good microphone.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's good.
Yeah. But I know, like you said, your week has been, or your past week was all about the Raspberry Pi, which I can't wait to hear about. My week has been all about LED lights and these microphones. It's been a very strange review week.
I wish my week were about LED lights. That's kind of cool. Listen, I won't belabor this point, but one thing I didn't get to talk about because we didn't have a show last week, I got to do career day at my son's school for 4 third grade classes and his first grade class. And for all those who don't like RGB computers, you need to embrace your inner child, because as soon as I showed the kids a video of the RGB computer that we made at Tom's Hardware, which has the most RGBs possible. They loved it. Holy cow.
I bet. That's so funny. I have been dealing with, at CES this year, Monster announced the Illuminescence line of like home mood lighting, and I have 5 products from the line that I've been testing. The reason I'm looking off in a weird direction if you're watching the video is because I'm looking at 2 of them right now that are in the hallway outside the studio. It's been a very strange review process because how do you review a light bulb? You know, it sure seems like a weird thing. I think I figured it out though, and those reviews will be up this week on all of them. So anyway, that's been my week.
What you've got to do is you've got to see how long it lasts before it burns out. Since there's supposed to be thousands of hours or years, what you need to do is you need to put up the review in a few years.
So I was thinking,
or time travel.
See, I was thinking about doing a follow-up ages from now when the products finally start to fail. Be like, hey, so it's been 3.5 years and the bulbs finally went. It'd be kind of a fun follow-up later on. I've actually been thinking about doing follow-ups on some of the products that I have like maintained usage on. Like I have a tracker that I keep on my keys. One of those, you know, Bluetooth LE type trackers, like a Tile. Most people know Tile. Yeah. This is a competitor for them.
Oh no, I have trackers.
Yeah, and
but
so
I found that the batteries died very fast.
See, that was one of the things about this one is the battery was actually really great, and that's the reason why I've kept it on my keys. I've got a half a dozen or more other ones as well, but I've kept this one on my keys because the battery worked so well, and I kind of want to go back and say that, like, you know, I reviewed this thing 1.25 years ago, and I'm still using it. That kind of thing. That's a bit of an endorsement. You know what I mean?
Yes. Now, the good thing about the tracker, I have to say, I do like the tracker stuff. It's just that every time I've used them, the battery seems to be running out on me pretty quick. One thing it's really good is the battery is removable. So
you're talking about the brand tracker with no E.
Yes. What are you talking about?
I am talking about the concept of a tracking device in general.
The concept.
Yeah. But yes, I agree, and that's one of the things that I liked about this one is that the battery is removable. You don't have to worry about trying to find a weird place to plug it in and charge it. Yeah. My key fob for my car is a rechargeable one. It takes a mini USB. Mini, not micro, mini. I have like none of those left. Anyway, so that's weird. But yeah, I've been thinking about going back and doing follow-ups on stuff. Anyway, so with that, how about we get into some news? This week's Nifty Gifties on F5 Live is proudly powered by the Microsoft Store. Whether you're looking for a new laptop, a Xbox One S or X, you're looking for a phone, a tablet, monitors, the Microsoft Store has it all. And there are a couple of deals running right now. I see a deal on the Xbox One S Fortnite Edition. I know that most of the Surfaces have been on sale. And there's a bunch of laptops on sale for up to $300 off right now. And remember, if you are military or a student, you get 10% off from the Microsoft Store on almost all products. And to find out about all those deals and all the products that are available, you can go to f5live.tv/Microsoft. All right. So, in an abrupt change of gears, let's talk about Apple. Over the last 23 years, within a matter of months, 23 years ago, 2 people joined the Apple team. One was Steve Jobs' return from his excommunication a couple of years prior, and the other was Joni Ive, who is or was the head of design for the company for most of his tenure at the company. He is responsible for everything from the design of the bizarre iMac 4 G4 that looked like a desk lamp through all the way up through, honest to God, the spaceship campus that the company is based out of now. It has been kind of his vision, the way the company has released and designed its products. And as of this week, Jony Ive is no longer an employee of Apple after 23 years with the company. He has left to create his own design firm, which makes sense. Because if you've been working on just tech products and just the very small selection of products, in the grand scheme of things, right? The small selection of products that Apple produces, you're going to stale out at some point. You're going to want to get your hands into something other than the dozen or so products that Apple has their hand in directly. That's my thought.
For what it's worth, and Wikipedia is always right, of course, they actually say that he started as an employee in 1992, and he took over as vice president of design in 97.
Oh, okay.
So
I had read that he had joined at about the same time. Okay, that makes sense.
But
so it's been 23 years of him in charge of design, essentially.
Yes.
Which is even more impressive.
Yes. So, I think, obviously, I've never been an Apple person, so take this for what it's worth. The guy obviously did some very interesting things, brought a focus to design for technology, which is great.
Mm-hmm. And for better or worse, his designs have heavily influenced the industry. Everybody hated the notch, and you can't get away from it today. All because of one of his designs. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But influential in the industry.
But I actually think that I don't know if he's exactly going anywhere, because he's going to start his own firm, and Apple's going to be a client of his. Right. And let's be honest, Apple hasn't had a lot of original ideas lately anyway. But, it would actually be a real refreshing thing if people stopped trying to copy Ive's designs, because it's gotten really boring. Yeah. Like, maybe that's the mark of the success, but if I have to see another silver notebook that looks like a MacBook.
Oh, I know.
If I have to see another phone that's trying to copy the iPhone, which itself hasn't changed much in the last several years. Right. So the Apple design is iconic, but it's also become really boring and played out. Mm-hmm. Which
I think might be an indication of him staling out on doing just a limited number of tech products. I think if he gets to flex his design muscle on other stuff, somebody comes to him and wants him to design a toaster, whatever kind of crazy thing, Cooper design does. I think him getting to flex that creativity will be good for him, and therefore possibly even good for Apple.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe it'll be good. Maybe he'll be able to do something more interesting. But frankly, what would be good for Apple is if they found somebody else to design their stuff, so they'd have more interesting things for other people to copy. Yeah. Or even better, other phone vendors, other compute PC vendors could try to make original designs, which a lot of them are. So I got to give some props, for example, to HP in the past couple of years. Kind of breaking out of the shadow of Apple design, and having things like their Spectre X360, which has these like angular corners now, and they're using colors like Poseidon blue and things like that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, the Surface laptops in those crazy colors that they come in, that maroon and the metallic blue and stuff like that. Yeah, there's definitely companies out there that are trying to buck the all silver trend. As I say that with a Surface book in front of me that is all silver.
Now, at the same time, I keep hearing that like Best Buy and all these other retailers say, yes, everybody likes to look at colorful computers, but they don't actually, but they buy silver. So, but maybe they buy silver because that's what Apple does.
Right.
I mean,
right.
There was a time when Apple did do color. It was the iMac.
Right.
And the iBook.
The G3. The thing that introduced color into technology. Honest to God. And that was Ive at his best. That was his first big project as the head of design for Apple, was the G3, both the iBook and the iMac, which everybody remembers. Love it or hate it, everybody knows the candy colored bubble Macs.
Yeah, no doubt. So
I got one around here somewhere.
Yeah, I thought those were beautiful. I mean, and I'm not a Mac guy, but I thought those were beautiful, and I kind of wanted one.
I liked that, and I mean, going back 23 years, even then, what did those come out in like mid 97 or something like that, mid to late 97? Yep. In 98, Compaq released a very similar Windows computer.
Yes. E-Machines had one that was my parents had an E-Machines computer that was like a direct clone of the iMac.
I remember the E-Machines one. But the iPac, which was originally the name for a computer and not a Palm Pilot, the iPacs were basically clones, and they sold.
Yep. Well, it was so I think his departure could be good. Good for Apple, good for the industry, but and maybe good for him. I know it's the end of an era, but it's become a pretty stale era right now. So
it's the end of the Steve Jobs era, which is kind of an important thing because, the two of them kind of coming in to their positions at the same time, and the two of them obviously working hand in hand for what does that work out to, about 18 years? That obviously the two of them had a similar thought process on design. Because Steve Jobs was notoriously mean to people whose designs he disagreed with. So obviously the two of them must have had a good synergy on their design ideas. So really, his leaving could indicate like a legitimate new wave of design for Apple, and the end of the Steve Jobs era, which obviously was important for Apple, because without those two guys, Apple probably wouldn't exist today. Since they were, filed for bankruptcy twice. They may not even be a thing today. But I think, like you said, I think it's time for some mix-up over there.
I would like to see Apple do a Microsoft, which I doubt, which would be so on Apple, but who knows? They've been doing some different things under Cook. But I mean, look at Microsoft trying to embrace all these other platforms, make software for Android, make a Linux command, Linux terminal as part of the OS.
You can go to the Microsoft store right now on Windows 10 and download like 9 different builds of Linux as a self-contained thing from the store. That's crazy.
Right. So
that's certainly not the Balmer Microsoft.
Right. It seems Microsoft's making money, so it seems to be a good idea. Maybe Apple will see that. But,
they've tried it a little bit. Apple Music is available on Android. They've branched out a little bit, but certainly not in the way that Microsoft has. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see if that would be part of it. and without Jobs' sidekick in an executive position, Tim Cook might feel a little different. You know what I mean? Maybe it's always possible that he's held back because Ive has been there, who was like Jobs' sidekick. Maybe he's felt uncomfortable making big moves. Maybe we'll see some changes over there. Who knows what this could bring? But I think from a designer's standpoint, from Ive's position, I think this will be good for him professionally and creatively. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. This week's Piltch Point with Avram Piltch is proudly powered by Newegg. Whether you're building a new computer or upgrading an existing one, Newegg has all of the parts and pieces you need to accomplish your goal. Whether you need a motherboard and processor, RAM, a new SSD, or you need a whole system, you can find them all at Newegg. Every day they've got some daily deals. Right now they've got some RAM and an SSD, which is crazy inexpensive. It's crazy to see an SSD for $19. For those of us who have been following it for a long time. But they've also got full systems, an HP laptop for $399. To see all of the deals that are available today and every day, and to find all of the products that are available, you can go to piltchpoint.live/Newegg. So, show and tell time. I always love Avram show and tell time.
So I got to tell you, I've been keeping this a secret for a while. The secret's out because the embargo is up, but I was one of a very handful of people to get early access to the new Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry Pi 4. Now, I got to tell you that I interviewed Eben Upton, the founder of Raspberry Pi and the CEO of Raspberry Pi Trading, which is the branch of the nonprofit Raspberry Pi Foundation that develops and manufactures the Pis. And back in January, he told me, "Oh, we're not going to be able to do this till next year." And then a couple months later, he called me. He's like, "Oh, things have changed." And what he told me had changed actually is this is what they were working on, but he didn't think they would be able to get the CPU in. I guess, for the price that they wanted in mass production for another year, and then they were able to. So let's have a look at this. Dun. All right. Okay, so here it is, the Raspberry Pi 4. Technically speaking, the Raspberry Pi 4B. Now, why is it the 4B? Because this is the form factor that Raspberry Pi has used in their most notably, hold on a moment, I'll show you a comparison here. This is a 3B plus. This is the latest beforehand, and this is the 4B, right? And you can see they're about the same size. There's like another millimeter or so on this because the port locations have changed a little bit. So what has changed? First thing that's changed is instead of one HDMI connector, you've got two mini HDMI connectors. So you can power dual monitors with this, no problem.
Wow.
In fact, you can power two 4K monitors with it. Now,
wow.
To be honest with you, it's not very quick when you have two 4K monitors.
Sure.
It can only do 30 hertz on two 4K monitors. If you want one 4K monitor, you can get 60 hertz. And if you want like two 1080p monitors, I'm not sure exactly what happens if you try two 2K monitors, but you can have a 4K 60 hertz and one 1080p monitor as well. But anyway, I've mainly got 1080p monitors at my desk. So if you got two 1080p monitors, no problem. The performance is really good. Two 4Ks at 30 hertz, it starts to be a little jerky. So that's one. The other thing is this uses a little bit more electricity, and so instead of having a micro USB connector for charging, it has a USB-C connector for charging. and it requires a charger that is at least 5 volts and at least 3 amps. So the prior one was 5 volts and 2.5 amps. So, not only will you need to have have a charger that does USB-C, but it's got to do at least 3 amps. And of course, there's an official one for $10. The processor is new. This is a 28 nanometer processor as opposed to the 40 nanometer processor on here. This runs at a native speed of 1.5 gigahertz. On the 3B Plus, that's 1.4 gigahertz, so not a huge difference in the clock speed, but with the lower nanometers and everything else, this uses a Cortex A72 architecture, and this is an A53, so it can do a lot more process a lot more instructions simultaneously. So even at the same clock speed or slightly higher clock speed, it's a lot faster. Another really big improvement in the Pi 4B is that it has up to 4 gigabytes of RAM. The previous Raspberry Pis, 1 gigabyte was all you got, and if you had a Pi Zero, that had 512, or you had a Pi A model that had 512. This is available in 1, 2, and 4 gigabyte configurations. This one here I have is the 4. The 1 gigabyte, it costs $35. The 2 gigabyte, $45, and the 4 gigabyte, $55. So $35 is usually what people expect to pay for a Raspberry Pi here. If you want the same amount of RAM you had in the old model, you can pay the same. But if you want more RAM, you got to pay a little more. Now, do you need more RAM? If you're using this as like a computer, which you can, then yes, it's good to have more RAM. If you're using it as like a weather station or something where it's just doing a limited of, interacting with a few sensors, you're not really multitasking and running the GUI on it, 1 gigabyte's probably fine. And if you're using an emulator, which the emulators don't work yet, I should disclaim. One of the things that's going on here, well, let me get to the end of the tour of it, and then I'll talk to you about compatibility. So one of the other things that's really, really important here is you'll see that look at the difference here in USB ports. You can see the colors. Here on my left, there's 2 USB 3 ports. Here on my right, the old model, it's all USB 2. So much faster connections to peripherals, meaning you can do what I was experimenting with this weekend and attach an external SSD to it and actually get pretty decent speeds out of that. Now, like Raspberry Pi, like all Raspberry Pis, it boots off of a micro SD card, and the micro SD slot is twice as fast as it was on here. You can't tell from looking at it, but it maxes out at a theoretical maximum of about 50 megabytes a second versus 25 for this. Either way, that's not great. But if you use an SSD, an external SSD, you will get better transfer rates. So what hasn't changed, it's got your 40-pin GPIO, which makes it compatible with all the old Raspberry Pi accessories, all the old well, I shouldn't say every accessory. It makes it compatible with the accessories, with any hats or things that you plugged in.
Okay.
But what it won't be compatible with are cases, because they have to have different layouts for the ports, and this ports jut out a little bit more, so you can't use an old Raspberry Pi case with this. And if there's something like a retro arcade system that you want to pop it into, and it was made specifically for the regular old reactor, you got to wait for a new one. The other thing is, you cannot. It requires a new version of the Raspberry Pi operating system, Raspbian. It requires a new version called Raspbian Buster. Raspbian Buster also runs on the old ones, but if you try to run an older version of the operating system on this, it won't boot. Well, unfortunately, a lot of apps, a lot of developers did not have early access to the Raspberry Pi 4, so they weren't working on, or to Raspbian. So they weren't working on launch day updates to their software. And as sometimes happens with Linux, unfortunately, you change a little bit about the operating system and apps break. So, for example, RetroPie, the main arcade emulator that people use, does not yet work. It's been a week and it does not yet work on the Raspberry Pi 4. So, there will be things that do not yet work on the Raspberry Pi 4 because of the operating system, because they may have to address the slightly different graphics card in this. It uses slightly faster GPU in the SoC. So there will be things that don't work, but they will soon work, for sure. So how does it perform? Well, Raspberry Pi Foundation says that it's 2 to 4 times faster than this, and that's pretty much true on all the tests that I ran. Now, if you're going to be browsing the web with it, you can competently. It has 802.11ac Wi-Fi, and it's got gigabit Ethernet. The Ethernet speed is actually an upgrade too, because it was only a third of gigabit on here. If you browse, the internet, it will do competently. It'll be competent. Video playback, unfortunately, still needs, I think, some tweaks, because even though it has 4K output, I was not able to play 4K videos on it without them basically coming to a halt. Even 1080p videos at full 1080p offline video seems to work okay at full screen if I'm in 1080p resolution. If I'm in 4K resolution and it tries to scale up, it gets sluggish. And if I'm doing YouTube video, no matter how fast the bandwidth, if I play 1080p video at full screen, it becomes it's definitely losing some frames. If I play 1080p video in YouTube video in a window where it's not taking up the whole screen, it can be smooth. So I hope those are some things that kind of get ironed out with the software and tweaks to the OS and things like that. But overall, this is an absolutely huge step up. I've said before that everybody should own a Raspberry Pi. Well, if you're going to buy a Raspberry Pi now, everybody should own the Raspberry Pi 4. And if you are wondering which one to get and you're not sure and you just want one to experiment with, you probably should spend the extra money and get the 4 gigabyte model. Now, that being said, I have not been able to find the 4 gigabyte model for sale online in the US. A lot of places still only have the 1 gigabyte model right now. But whichever you get, the performance will be good, and generally you're not using more than 1 gigabyte of RAM unless you're using this like a computer and you're multitasking. But if you want to try that experience, it's designed to actually be good enough to be used as a computer. Although I wouldn't say that people are going to be throwing away their PCs anytime soon in favor of this. But isn't it good to know that you have something that's this powerful? I mean, the best use cases for it are the ones that we haven't even really seen yet, which is using it for things like machine learning and object recognition and better Internet of Things devices, more so than using it as a standalone PC. Mm-hmm. And you can read a lot more about it on tomshardware.com. We've got a series. We've got a very detailed review with benchmarks. We've got stories on overclocking it, and we've got we will soon, tomorrow, probably have a story up on what it runs like with an SSD inside. So we continue to mine this product, which is really fascinating. Really fascinating, and I definitely recommend people to buy it. Every self-respecting tech enthusiast could use one of these.
Well, that's really cool. So you said that you're finding the 1 gigs available, and the other models not so much yet.
Yeah, I mean, you can look around online. It changes day to day. I know some people managed to buy the 4s online, but I think some of them bought them from England or things like that. No Raspberry Pi manufactures these in the UK. So Micro Center is a fantastic place. If you live near Micro Center, it's a fantastic place to get these because a lot of their local stores have the 1 gigabyte in stock. And there's a few, online, a lot of places are still getting them.
Got it. Well, I have been thinking. You mentioned enhanced like Internet of Things devices. I've been also thinking like being able to enhance embedded technologies. Things like we've seen at CES the last couple of years. We've seen the smart mirrors, and they're always kind of half-cocked ideas. But with something like this, you could really be able to pull lots of data sources together without having to fear the repercussions, right? Because that's always the problem when you're pulling lots of data sources on something with a small amount of RAM or something like that. Being able to process all that starts to become a problem. But if you've got up to 4 gigs to be able to display and process weather data and all that kind of stuff, it starts to get way more feasible.
Yeah, I think it will be really good for that. I did run some machine learning, at least one machine learning benchmark on it. Another one I tried, which seems to now, in the latest build of Buster, Raspbian Buster, I cannot get working. But I tried a tutorial that actually works on the old Raspberry Pi, that will do object recognition using Google TensorFlow. And that was way improved on this, but still depends on what you consider slow. So like original Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, I was getting like 0.9 frames per second object recognition with a webcam attached to it. On this, I was getting 1.7. So like that's a 70% improvement, but it's still 1.7 frames a second.
Right.
Now, so it depends, but that's that program, right? So it depends on what you're doing with it, obviously.
Sure. I was involved at the tail end of a project. The company I work with was involved with doing an object recognition thing using TensorFlow, and they ended up abandoning Raspberry Pi as their embedded processor because of that. They ended up using it as the thing transmitting the video remotely to the TensorFlow, but they couldn't use it as the processor for exactly that reason.
Well, for what it's worth, and I haven't actually had. I actually want to say I wasn't even. This was another thing where the instructions and tutorials I had to do it didn't work in the latest Raspbian, and maybe they will, when it gets updated. But one thing I have over here that I have not really gotten working well yet. I think I got it working for a minute, but not with live object recognition, is this thing. So this here is a Google Coral USB accelerator, and it is something that a lot of people use with the Raspberry Pi. And this is meant to offload some of that processing directly onto this thing.
Oh.
And it should work better on the 4 because, as you can see, it's USB 3. So it'll have the bandwidth. So that kind of thing could actually be another thing that makes it, more, even better at object recognition.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm looking at the the site for it right now, and they specifically mentioned using it with Raspberry Pi and TensorFlow Lite. So yeah. That's a cool thing I've not encountered. The project we were working on ended up going with a specialty processing computer because they needed like super fast processing, but doing defense projects works that way. Anyway, well, that is a really cool device. I've been following all the stuff you guys have published this week, which has been interesting. I always like Raspberry Pi stuff. So
it's a passion for me, so I really have enjoyed working on it. It was one of those things, though, having early access to it was really great and a wonderful privilege. But new software builds were coming out for it like every day or two. So I tried something, it didn't work, or I'd run a benchmark, and then I'd be like, oh, new build came out. Now I got to reinstall everything. So
yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm glad that you were able to do like a really in-depth dive into it, because it's a fascinating fascinating technology, and like you said, it's one of those things that is appropriate for more and more people every day. So, obviously, thanks for showing it off. I can't wait to get my hands on one of them, hopefully pretty soon. This week's Extra Life on F5 Live is proudly powered by Razer. All the accessories you need to up your game on both PC and on console are available from Razer. And right now, they've got a whole bunch of deals running. And in fact, if you are interested in any of the Razer Quartz Edition products, which are the pink versions of a number of their products, they are all on sale right now for actually pretty great discounts. Whether you're looking for a microphone, a headset, a mouse, keyboard, and even full systems, Razer has got some deals for you. And you can find all of those deals and all of their products by going to f5live.tv/Razer. Now, if they just put the white ones on sale, I'd be all kinds of excited. All right. So, we've talked about the benefits of Switch Online since it launched a number of months ago, and one of them, just like Xbox Live and PlayStation Plus, is that you get free games. And up until now, all of those games have been original NES titles, which is a lot of fun for somebody like me who grew up with the NES as their first personal console. However, younger people with Switches may or may not have the same nostalgic connection. And in an almost unrelated question, the president of Nintendo confirmed that they are considering expanding the lineup outside of the NES. Somebody asked, interestingly enough, not about the Switch at all, but instead if Nintendo was ever going to release the classic consoles for the N64. For those who don't know, Nintendo released an NES Classic and a Super NES Classic, which were small versions of the console that came preloaded with a bunch of games. The SNES actually came with a game that never released in the United States. And everybody has wanted an N64, because everybody wants to play Super Mario 64 without having to find a used copy and buy it for way more than its original retail, which is the way it usually works out. So he said, nope, right now we are not considering that. However, we are considering putting non-NES titles into the classic console on the Switch, which I think is just as good. Because that means you could take them with you as well. And we know that Nintendo is super litigious when it comes to emulators and things like that. So if they were to make it available and make it portable by putting it on the Switch, I think that would be crazy popular, especially with the rumored Switch Mini coming out soon.
So do you know if you would have to buy each title, or would it be sort of part of the subscription? Part of the
subscription. There are titles that are available in the classic console for purchase, but this is specifically dealing with kind of retrofitting a bunch of the games and putting them as part of the Switch Online subscription. So that's super cool, because Switch Online is only $20 a year, as opposed to, PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live, they're like $70 a year. And if you have if you have Amazon Prime, which we'll talk about in a minute, you get a year for free. So, there's...
So, go
ahead.
You were saying?
Nope, I don't know where I was going to go with that sentence, so I'm good.
Oh, okay. So you said something that really struck me, which is you were old enough to have played SNES and NES, but you think that younger people that wasn't a thing in the prime of their childhood wouldn't play those games.
Not necessarily that they wouldn't play those games, but certainly that it wouldn't have the same nostalgia factor that it does for me.
See, it's interesting to me because I was having that debate with some people, not nostalgia, just like whether it was appealing with folks at my office. And, I work with a lot of people in their 20s and early 30s who didn't grow up with some of the games that I grew up with,
sure,
like, original arcade games and Atari 2600. And so, I was talking about it, I think I mentioned the game Fast Food or something, which I don't know how many people would remember. The one I forget what it was. I was saying something we were doing was like fast food where the pickles just keep coming at you, and if you eat them, you burp, and that's the end of the game. Anyway, so I was mentioning that, and a bunch of the youngins at my job were like, no, never heard of that, didn't play games like that, not interested in playing those sorts of games on an emulator. And then I thought about my son, who's 7 years old, and I've shown him those games, and he loves them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've shown him, all kinds of old games, and he likes them. He doesn't have a sense of, maybe he will, I don't know. He doesn't yet have a sense of, okay, this game is old,
mm-hmm,
it's low resolution, doesn't have as many features, so it's bad.
Right.
Like he likes the old games.
And having zero connection to them, which I think is like people in in their 20s have a connection to a certain collection of titles, and so they get caught to that, and they think things that came before are whatever. But Nintendo, however, is the exception to that rule. I don't know why, but Nintendo is the exception to that rule because Nintendo keeps releasing, like, Mario Maker 2 just came out, which is basically make your own levels for the old games. And by just came out, I mean, like, last week. So Nintendo knows how to capitalize on nostalgia, even if it's not yours, in a way that is different from everybody else's.
Yes, Nintendo is very, very good at maximizing their IP. And we've talked about this before. Like, I don't know what would happen if they were a little bit more fast and loose with who could play, what kind of systems could play Nintendo games, and how easy it was to get Nintendo games. But
well, I think
they're really.
I think they would say that it would be a disaster because their experience with the Panasonic-made Zelda games was such a disaster. They're not usually willing to let their IP out of their direct line of sight anymore.
Yeah, so they've done a really good job of, being about storytelling,
mm-hmm,
and a particular type of sort of cute storytelling that people like, and that's their gig.
And they've managed to maintain a couple of franchises for a very long time without becoming Activision. Like the idea that there's another Zelda Breath of the Wild game coming out, and that Nintendo decided to do it as a sequel because there were so many DLC ideas that Nintendo did not want to screw their players over doing it as DLC after DLC after DLC, that they decided to build it as a whole second game. That's not Activision. They know how to focus on the gamer and not on the investors, I guess. So you can play a Mario game Mario's been around. The 82 was the first home game, 83, something like that. So here we are in 2019, and they're releasing new Mario games. Nobody's tired of it. Nobody calls them out for milking a franchise. In fact, if they don't come out fast enough, people get mad. As opposed to Call of Duty, that people are like, oh my god, are they doing another one? So, I like the idea of seeing some slightly more modern games come to Switch Online. Obviously, I have all the old consoles. We've discussed it many times on the show. You mentioned the 2600. I've got one of those, a couple of NES and Genesis and all those things. But there's something about having it on hardware that I trust, more modern hardware, that's super appealing. So, anyway, there's no timeline on what this might mean, when we might see something like this, but the fact that the company has, officially said, yes, we're looking into it, is a good sign for the future. This week's news from the tubes on F5 Live is proudly powered by RiffTrax. Make fun of movies, or let these guys do it for you, because they're the professionals. Mike Nelson, Bill Corbett, and Kevin Murphy, the former stars of Mystery Science Theater 3000, are back and doing what they do best. Creating commentaries for Hollywood blockbusters and B-movie oddities like... it went away. It was a silly name. I liked it, though. Oh well. Let's go with Sherlock Holmes and the Deadly Necklace. I don't even know what to do with that string of words. The way it usually works, is for a couple of dollars, you download the MP3, play it along with your DVD, Netflix, Amazon, wherever the movie happens to exist, and laugh. The mobile app is also really great because all you have to do is say, this is the movie I'm doing, and it will sync up with your TV automatically. Absolutely wonderful. I love it. They also do live events. I don't know if and or when our next live event is. I know there was one just a couple of weeks ago. August 15th, the giant spider invasion will be in theaters nationwide. And to find out what theaters you can see it in, and to see all the feature-length films and the short films, you can go to f5live.tv/rifftrack with an X. While I wasn't feeling well this past week, I actually watched a bunch of riff tracks because it always makes me feel better. And a bunch of the old live events too. All right, so we have talked a number of times over the last couple of years about the fear that governments across the world have about encryption. The conversation was stirred up most recently in the last couple of years by the San Bernardino case, where there was an iPhone that had information that they thought might be useful for putting together a timeline, and one of the police made a stupid mistake, ended up locking the phone locking the phone. And when the phone ends up being locked, it encrypts the storage. And so they tried to get a court order to force Apple to create a whole special version of iOS so that they could bypass the lock. And Apple said, no, thank you, because once a hack like that exists, it exists, and we'd like to not have that be a thing. And so that started to stir up the conversation about quote-unquote responsible encryption, which is a silly term that does not mean what it sounds like. It means that the only responsibility for the encryptor is to the government and not to the person that they are encrypting it for. And so it has been a sensitive subject across the world. We talked a while back that Australia tried to pass a law banning strong encryption. And now, according to a report from one of those black box secret executive branch meetings, The executive branch of the United States is considering asking Congress to do the same thing and pass a law that would outlaw unbreakable encryption or strong encryption, which, oh my goodness, is a terrible idea for so many reasons. So many reasons.
Yes. So, first of all, you're right. It would eventually leak out to other entities besides the U.S. government. But, once the encryption, first of all, I won't even come down to pro and con of this, but I think there's a lot of people who don't necessarily trust the U.S. government.
Sure.
And then let's throw on top of that the fact that if it's made here, just because these are American companies, doesn't mean that they also would not share the back door with other governments of other countries.
Yeah.
So if you trust the U.S. government, don't mind anyone in the U.S. government getting access to your data, how about the government of any other country you can name?
Right.
Exactly. Do you want them having access to your data? Do you want them having access to the data of people who are, activists or, doing things that, maybe that government doesn't like?
Right. Because there are a lot of places where being an activist, being an anti-government, outspoken person, you might just disappear. There are several countries where we've seen that happen. Russia, that has happened a number of times over the last couple of years. If you're not able to keep your stuff secret in a place like that, really bad stuff starts to happen.
Yeah, no question about it. So, yeah, there will be people who, there would be people who die because of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or I don't know, they'd have to find another way of communicating. But I don't know what the other way of communicating is, in this digital age. Piece of paper.
I was going to say,
what did they use in the 80s?
You get back to letters.
Yeah. What did dissidents use what did dissidents of, repressive regimes use in the 80s to communicate? Paper? I don't know. Wasn't easy though, right?
Right.
So I think, now of course the pro-government side would be, well, yes, but then there will be criminals and terrorists and all kinds of people who will encrypt what they are doing. I mean, I guess that, you have privacy.
They always have,
you have
though.
Security.
They've always obfuscated what they're doing. There's just different ways to do it today than there were, like you said, in the 80s. Because the criminals were obfuscating their conversations then, too.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, there's any time that you have an open society where where the government does not get to see everything that you do, there will be people who will take advantage of that to commit crimes. But I would argue that it is better than the alternative, where you have a closed society where the government can see everything that you do. So, it's quite frightening, and that's just with the thought that a government or governments would have this. But as you suggest, it'll get out there, and all kinds of other actors will get it. Criminals probably want to break into your stuff.
Yep.
So yeah,
and that was Tim Cook's whole argument in court. CEO of Apple sat in a federal court and had to say, if we create a way to bypass the encryption on the phones, then we have created a way to bypass the encryption on the phones. We understand. You were saying that we can keep it, that it's entirely internal. We don't have to give it to you. You will give us the phone. We would install the operating system and then hand you the unlocked device. But that would involve it existing. Once it exists, it will guaranteed get out of our control. And, if Edward Snowden is a person who exists and what he did happened, which I think we all know what happened there. If the government can't keep its own secrets, there's no way somebody like Apple's going to keep something. There's way more people with their hands in that pie than the couple dozen people that were in Snowden's group, you know?
Yeah.
It'll get out. No matter how private you try and keep something like that, it will get out and it will get into the wrong hands. Plain and simple. In the case of the iPhone, all of a sudden, there's a market again for stealing an iPhone, which right now there kind of isn't, because once you report it stolen to Apple, the thing basically bricks itself until you can unlock it, which is what the government asked them to do.
Here's another thing to consider. So the U.S. government is asking companies to do quote unquote responsible encryption, which means a backdoor. But there will be other entities and companies that come up with encryption that has no backdoor. So they're putting those companies at a competitive disadvantage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I guarantee you that there will be a way, just because Apple wants to say, okay, we're going to put a backdoor into our iPhone, doesn't mean that other people aren't going to come up with, other hardware, other software that is encrypted. I mean, there's not one encryption. There are many. Sure. So,
Yeah, you've got...
I'm assuming that...
You've got Microsoft that just this week announced the Vault, right? The Personal Vault or whatever in Azure. Nope, in OneDrive, which is an end-to-end encrypted section of OneDrive, which Microsoft cannot breach. Now, if the government says Microsoft has to be able to breach it, well, you can guarantee that some company that we've never heard of today is going to create something somewhere in Tor, that's anonymous and completely end-to-end encrypted that can't be traced. And you're right, it puts Microsoft at a massive disadvantage, because everybody's going to want to be able to encrypt their data in a way that can't be broken.
Yes.
So there will always be a way. There will always be a way around it, both ways. There will be a way to take advantage of a backdoor, and there will be organizations that secretly put together other types of encryption. Plain and simple. So we had somebody ask when this got posted on Facebook. We had somebody ask, how do you enforce something like this? How does the government enforce something like this? And I said, in reality, only against the big guys. It's the only way to enforce it.
Yeah. That's the other thing. Also, here's my question: what about all the things that are encrypted right now and don't have a backdoor in them? Mm-hmm. They can't retroactively put a backdoor into systems that don't have one now, right?
Nope.
That stuff's already encrypted.
Yep.
I guess they could, update Windows so that anything Windows encrypts from now on and decrypts when it re-encrypts or whatever now has a backdoor in it.
Yeah.
But people who didn't update Windows, people who have, or some other software, the third-party software they're using for encryption,
right?
If it's, it's not going to help them with stuff they would have to be a new encryption that has a backdoor.
Correct. Yeah. So, you'd have to have BitLocker would have to go and undo everything on a drive as part of an update and then redo it with a new algorithm that's got, a common key somewhere. So, yeah. So
yes,
you just
new and unimproved.
Yeah. You just prevent a certain, KB download in Windows 10 and you would avoid it. There's no way it would ever work, I guess, is the thing. You can try, but there'd be a million ways around it. Somebody's going to create a BitLocker competitor and publish it on Tor. Nobody will know who it is. We're 10 years into Bitcoin and we don't know who it is. and that's public. You know what I mean? It's easy enough to stay anonymous on something like that. There's all kinds of like open source type projects that people have no idea who's behind ages later. So yeah, there'd be all kinds of alternatives. There's no way to enforce it. You could only enforce it with threats of jail against, Satya Nadella from Microsoft and guys like that. But there'd be a million other ways to deal with it, I guess, is the important takeaway there.
Yep.
This week's DRM Not Included on F5 Live is proudly powered by Amazon Prime. You know your basic benefits, but there's a lot more. You get Prime Music, which has several million tracks available to stream for free as part of your subscription. There's Avram's favorite Prime Video with TV, movies, documentaries, both original and licensed content, including some HBO back catalog and all kinds of stuff. Also available as part of your subscription. Then there's my favorite, Twitch Prime, which gives you one free subscription on Twitch, which you can use to help support your favorite streamer. You can use it for us or any other content creator. You also get free games every month, which is really great. I've been playing all kinds of free games off of Twitch Prime lately, including one of my favorite games of all time, Psychonauts, was on there. And then right now, they've still got a deal where you can get a free year of Switch Online for your Nintendo Switch and also get the free games over there, which we talked about a little while ago. There's a lot of other benefits as well. We've got a list of our favorites and quick links to get to them. Plus, if you're not currently a subscriber, we've got a 30-day free trial, which right now is a great time to try it out because Prime Day is just about 2 weeks away, and you can get all those benefits as part of your trial as well. You can see all of that by going to f5live.tv/prime. So, speaking of streaming, something interesting happened this week. A change of direction. We know that obviously TV stations cancel shows all the time. Sometimes after a short period of time, sometimes after a long, and older series can get new life on streaming services. The Office is still the #1 streamed show on any platform. And it's on exclusively on Netflix right now. It will be moving over to NBC in 2021, but it is the most watched show on streaming now, years after it ended. We've seen shows like The Mindy Project get saved from oblivion by Hulu. Arrested Development was revived a while after it had been canceled by Netflix. But this week, something weird happened. Netflix canceled One Day at a Time after a couple of seasons. And for the first time ever, a cable network has picked up the option to continue that series. Never before has a traditional TV service uncanceled a show canceled by a streaming service. It's backwards and it's super weird.
Well, we know that I was reading somewhere about Netflix's contracts that they have with the various production agencies they use for their original shows. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those contracts actually forbid the shows from going to other networks.
Yeah, forbid the hop afterwards. Even the contract that Netflix had with Marvel for Marvel's own shows, Marvel isn't allowed to create a competitor for their own content for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. So
pretty airtight on Netflix's side. So that makes this even weirder.
It's sad, for those shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really liked Santa Clarita Diet, and
mm-hmm.
they canceled it after 3 seasons. And apparently, one of the things is that they cancel a lot of shows after 3 seasons. Apparently,
Travelers.
They figured out in binge watching, or or something, people only binge watch up to a certain point, and they don't see a lot of people binge watching more than 3 seasons or something.
Fascinating.
And something like it's like 8 episodes is a good. They figured it out down to the number of episodes and down to the number of seasons. Sad for people like me who, if you really like a show, you're just going to keep watching. This is surprising.
I could watch Travelers for weeks, and it's
interesting.
It's gone.
Interesting. You mentioned, that was gone after 3.
Yep.
Interesting. You mentioned that show. I liked that show. I felt that they brought it to a fairly satisfying conclusion. Like it wasn't much of a cliffhanger. So that's good. Meanwhile, not to go too far off topic, but my absolutely favorite streaming show, probably of all time, I just finished watching the 2nd season today of Dark. And I can't recommend that show enough. It is so excellent on Netflix. But they've actually only planned to have 3 seasons. So supposedly
they went into it knowing
get
that.
Their 3rd season.
They went into it knowing that.
Supposedly, so
interesting.
That's good. But when you have a show that it would be nice if continued.
Well,
the thing
that sets this show apart from most of the others, I think, and the reason why it was allowed to be picked up by another network, is that One Day at a Time is a retelling of an older series, right? And Netflix doesn't own the rights to it. They licensed the name. And I think that's the reason why they were allowed to option out, because it's not actually Netflix's show. Like if Fuller House had done better than it did when it was canceled, I bet ABC could have optioned it, is my guess. Because again, it's ABC's intellectual property. I bet they could have optioned it out, but it didn't do well enough for them to care. But I bet they could have. If Disney wanted to, I bet they could have continued it.
But you said Marvel can't continue theirs, so that's interesting, right?
Right. But that was a wider agreement between the two of them, though. For like
I won
5 series and a whole, like, there was a whole big thing there. I think that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an interesting move. It's definitely backwards from what we're used to talking about.
So what are the ramifications of this? Does this mean that Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen have to get remarried?
Oh my god, I don't even know what to do with that sentence, Avram.
Sorry. For those who have only watched the new show, and I'm old enough to have only watched the old show, Valerie Bertinelli was like one of the main characters on the show, and she was married to Eddie Van Halen in real life for a long time.
Oh, yeah, before changing her personal goals, I guess. Anyway, so speaking of ramifications in real life, they're actually kind of interesting. So I think what happened here is the network that picked it up is Pop TV. Pop TV is owned by CBS, who owns obviously CBS All Access, who has been attempting to kind of bolster the CBS All Access streaming service. And so they just picked up a critically popular and a show with a die-hard streaming base that could likely see its move over to CBS All Access. They have said that episodes will air on All Access after they premiere on Pop TV. So it's possible that they are trying to woo some Netflix diehards that were big fans of this show to come try out CBS All Access with something that they're already familiar with. If so, I think it's a brilliant move. Because, you know, they've struggled to get people to accept all access. And if they're already, because it's CBS and it's got the, you know, it's got the eye and everybody recognizes the logo. But if you were already a fan of the show and it's just hopped from one streaming service to another, you might follow it. At least in a limited, limited run.
Yeah, look, if a show I really liked hopped, then I would certainly consider it. Yeah.
So it might end up being a brilliant move to expose some new people to CBS All Access. Maybe some of them stay, which, you know, I think would be good for their service, obviously, because it's not inexpensive to run something like that. So, and then, you know, with new shows like Picard and stuff coming, you know, the timing might be right. What we don't know is exactly what the timeline on all of this will be, or what it means for the old seasons, the 3 Netflix seasons. We don't know if those will stay on Netflix, if they'll also be available on All Access, if they'll move entirely, which would be a new thing for Netflix. So we don't know what any of that means, or even when season 4 will premiere on Pop TV, but obviously they will probably make a big deal of it when it happens. Well, that is our show. Thank you to those of you who joined us live. We always appreciate having our live viewers. I saw some people in and out on my count over here. So thank you to those of you who joined us live. If you weren't able to join us live and would like to in the future, Sunday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, f5live.tv/join us. And if you would like to instead subscribe and listen on your own timetable, because it's not just appointment television here, you can go to PLUGHITZlive.com/subscribe, and there you'll see all of our shows and all of the many ways that you can subscribe to them, social and podcatchers and all of that, and of course on YouTube. So I guess with that, on behalf of the staff that's not here, I'm Scott.
I'm Avram.
And we will see you guys back next time. Ciao.